Sit back, it's time to get groovy. Question, do you remember that movie?
Welcome back to Remember That Movie. I am the third Alejandro Rosa on IMDb.
And I'm Steve Johnston, and I am not on IMDb.
And as you can tell, I am not alone.
There's someone else in the room.
And I am not in my normal environment for recording. I'm actually in Washington, D.C. right now, and this is our friend Shaun.
And I am also not on IMDb.
We happen to be seeing each other for the first time in about 20 years. 20 plus years.
20 plus years, yeah.
Ooh. And decided that the best way we could spend time together was not partying or doing shots, but instead recording a podcast. With you, Steve.
I am honored, and the geekiness of it just fits you perfectly.
I would like you to know, Steve, that I just tried sake for the first time.
Oh, how did you find it?
I didn't like it.
At all.
Not at all.
We thought it would be cool if we drank sake while we were actually doing this.
Yeah.
And then I tried it. And so now I'm not. I will be drinking water.
I didn't have strong feelings one way or the other when I tried it. It's like, okay, it's there.
It's a bit like tasty nail polish, really.
Yes.
That's the second time today you've described something in a terrible way, like you're trying to sell it.
Try this.
The other one was
awful.
natto, which is a mucusy fermented soybean.
Oh, yes.
Which is absolutely delicious, but
Yeah.
I
But
didn't
you
sell it.
started by using the word mucusy. For this episode, we actually did not choose this film. We actually let Shaun do it. This is part of our kind of Halloween double feature. So, for the first one, we are going back to 1987, specifically July 31st, 1987, for the kind of cult classic, The Lost Boys. We're going to get into our individual experiences with this film, but first we're going to do a very brief synopsis, just for anybody who has not watched this amazing cult classic, and I am going to do my best to summarize this as quickly as possible.
I wish you the best of luck.
Michael, Sam, and their mother Lucy moved to Santa Clara, California to live with Michael and Sam's grandfather. Michael, following a girl named Star, becomes involved with a small biker gang run by a man named David. He later discovers that this biker gang is actually made up of vampires, and that he is slowly becoming one of them. In the meantime, Sam befriends the Frog Brothers, who run a comic book store and claim to be vampire hunters as well. When Michael refuses to kill, an epic showdown takes place between him, Sam, Star, the Frog Brothers, and David and his biker gang. This leads to the discovery that Michael's mother is dating the head vampire, who is Max. In the end, Grandpa saves the day. Now, I have a long experience with this film, but I first want to hear from you guys. Let's start with our guest, who is the person who picked this film. Shaun, what is your history with this film?
I think from my childhood, more than any other film that I've seen, the lines from this movie have just stuck in my head over the years, and I just pull them out at random. I mean, there's just one line after another that is so memorable. I remember this film more than any other, and probably I watched it more than any other as a kid. I don't think I saw it in the cinema, but I think like most people, you go to the video store, and I probably got it when it was a new release. And, you know, in those days, you had to return that VHS tape the next day when it was a new release, and then you could keep it for a week if it was an older film. And I think we all watched it, and we watched it 2, maybe 3 times that first time we got it. And then subsequently we rented it again and watched it over and over and over again. I do remember around that time, my sister used to tease my hair up and hairspray it like was it Corey Haim? Mm-hmm. And that his hair was all puffed up and hairsprayed. Yeah. And her friends had a great time puffing up my hair and hairspraying it. There were so many things about this movie that I loved, from the performances, the music, the sound effects, there's just so many things that...
And we'll get to it.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this. When was the last time you saw it before this time?
Maybe a decade ago?
Steve, what about you? What's your Lost Boys background?
Quite the opposite of that, I'm afraid. I missed the boat on this one. I was aware of the movie's existence because I found it in the video store. And I thought, oh, cool! They've done a spin-off of Peter Pan where we'll follow the Lost Boys for a bit and see what they get up to. I was informed several years later that no, that is not what this movie is about. It wasn't sort of the type of movie I was interested in at the time, and I just never got around to watching it until a couple days ago.
Wow, your first time.
Yep, my first time.
I have a confession to make. It was only in reading up on this film that I finally understood the title. I didn't know it was a reference to Peter Pan. Even though I like Peter Pan, I never put two and two together. Oh, The Lost Boys. I actually grew up watching this film. I think we had it on video. I think it was on HBO. Not a sponsor yet. And I think I watched it over and over and over again. I think Star is one of my early crushes.
Mine too.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, the mom as well.
That's amazing. You can have lots of different likes, folks. Which is funny because Star doesn't say that much. Star. That's my Star impersonation.
Michael,
she didn't say
no.
her own name, did she?
Yeah, at some point he asked
She
him. She asked him. He asked her, "What's your name?"
Oh, she
Star.
did. Star. Laddie.
Laddie is definitely a character that I did not really pay attention to until this time around, and my initial impression of Laddie was, what is this child doing here? Why is this child with this biker gang?
They never explain it.
No, other than the fact that they decided we're going to turn this kid. It was directed by Joel Schumacher, which I also did not know. Very famous director, directed St. Elmo's Fire, Dying Young, Falling Down, The Client, A Time to Kill, and then some of the other movies that he's well known for, such as Batman Forever and Batman and Robin.
Didn't he do Flatliners as well?
He might have done Flatliners.
I think he did.
Yeah, you might be right. The screenplay was actually written by 3 people, but it was originally written by 2. So we have Jamie Fisher and James Jeremias. They were, I think, first-time screenwriters. They got a deal. It was like $400,000 to write the script for The Lost Boys.
Dang.
Here's my favorite quote from Jeremias. What if the reason Peter Pan came out at night and never grew old was because he was a vampire? That was the kind of impetus for this script. Now, this script was originally not for Joel Schumacher. It was for Richard Donner. And this movie was not about teenagers. Richard Donner had just finished another famous film. Does anybody know what that was?
Must have been Goonies.
You are absolutely correct. It is The Goonies. So he had just created The Goonies. And they were going to theme this movie like The Goonies. It was going to be 13 and like 14-year-old vampires. The Frog Brothers were going to be Cub Scouts.
I don't think that would have worked.
I don't know if it would have had the staying power that this film had. But here's what happened. Richard Donner got busy doing other projects, and he just couldn't direct it. And so they got Joel Schumacher, who said, this isn't going to work. Let's make them older. Let's make them sexy. And he got a very famous playwright by the name of Jeffrey Boam, or Boam, B-O-A-M. I apologize for mispronouncing your last name, to come in and punch up the script and turn it into a kind of teenager vampire story. They believe this is the film that changed the kind of story of vampires, making them young and sexy that we would see forever and ever. This is the first time, really, that we see that in film.
So we can blame Twilight on this.
Yes,
It
this
is essentially a teenage vampire film.
which is why we all liked it. Well, 2 of the 3 of us.
We haven't heard his
That's right.
opinion
No. But why we all liked it when we were younger. Because, yeah, it was made for us. It spoke to me. Star. Anyway. It has a very interesting cast. Jason Patric plays Michael, who's kind of our leading man in this film, leading teen, who doesn't look like a teenager. He had just done a film called Solar Babies. Is anyone familiar with Solar Babies? Am I really the only one who obsessively watched Solar Babies? On HBO.
Obsessively watched, yes, though that title is ringing a bell.
Well, Jami Gertz, who played Star, was actually in that movie with Jason Patric. We have Corey Haim playing Sam, in a great role for such a young actor. Dianne Wiest, 2-time Academy Award winner. She had actually just won her first Academy Award the year prior for Hannah and Her Sisters when she does this movie, which I think is always hilarious when you see an actor win an Academy Award and then do a ridiculous movie right after.
Now, because I am not allowed to do any research whatsoever, Dianne Wiest, she is the mother from Edward Scissorhands, yes?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you.
She was cute in that as well.
Yes,
I just thought I'd add that. Yeah.
We have a Dianne Wiest fanboy over here.
I understand.
She's fantastic. Bullet Over Broadway. Did you ever see her in that?
No.
Oh,
I guess
that's
should.
how she won
Do
her
you know what
second
I know
Academy
her
Award.
from the most?
What?
Lost Boys.
Wow. Corey Feldman plays Edgar Frog of the Frog Brothers. Jamison Newlander plays the other Frog brother, Alan Frog. Jami Gertz. Joel Schumacher wasn't convinced that she was right for Star. He didn't talk to us. He wasn't convinced about Corey Haim either, apparently, until Corey Haim read for the part. And then he was like, oh yeah, that'll do. That'll do.
Perfect.
He was perfect. Another great, absolutely mesmerizing role is Kiefer Sutherland.
Oh, yes.
David. I think one of his most famous roles.
This is always mentioned in any top 10 list of his roles throughout film.
Then we have Edward Herrmann, Tony Award winner, very famous character actor who ends up playing Max. We've seen him in everything. Most people would know him more recently from when he was on the Gilmore Girls.
Oh, yes. Thank you. He has a very recognizable face. I just couldn't place where I'd seen it.
And if we ever do the film Overboard, starring Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell, he is her husband, the rich man on the boat.
That's
him.
him.
That's
Wow.
him. And he is hysterical in that
I don't
movie.
think I've seen that film since it came out.
Alex Winter, who played Marco. Do you remember what he's most famous for? Does the word Keanu ring a bell?
Bill and Ted.
Bill and Ted.
Oh,
Excellent Adventure, Bogus Journey, and the third one that I haven't seen yet.
Yes. And they are about to do Waiting for Godot. The two of them are actually doing a stage production of Waiting for Godot.
that's awesome.
I would definitely be into seeing that.
Yeah. Last but not least, I'll throw in Tim Capello. He is our famous saxophone player. Very famous for being muscular and oily and saxophony.
He made my notes oily sax player, so.
I've spoken ad nauseum about the Reservation Dogs. In the finale of season 2, the characters have this whole journey of getting to California, which they get to at the end of season 2, finally. It's a very emotional moment, but in the middle of that episode, one of them starts talking about Tim Capello and his career, and it has weight to it. Like, it's not just a joke or a reference to Lost Boys, but it is talking about the career and how it connects to the plot. And then at the very end of the episode, while they're on the beach saying goodbye to their friend who has passed away, Tim Capello shows up, like, on the beach and just starts playing sax. So wild. So anyway, that's my little reference there.
That
for you
sounds
guys.
as random as it was in The Lost Boys.
Yes.
Is he still, was he still shirtless and oily?
I don't actually remember.
I think that his appearance in the film was by far the most random thing in the film. Like, it was the most pure 80s. I mean, the whole thing was pure 80s, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It was a wonderful trip down memory lane. But
yes.
his appearance in that film was pure 80s. Like, there was nothing else that screamed 80s as much as him playing saxophone oiled up into a raging happy crowd in the middle of the night. I told you today that I had one fact that I had heard about, and you said save it.
Save it.
It's about him.
Oh.
Apparently, in some graphic novel that came out much later, maybe in the past decade, about Lost Boys, they continued the story. He turned out to be something like a vampire hunter as well. And he has a central role in fighting the vampires in Santa Clara.
I love the fact that you say, oh, he turns into a vampire hunter. And my first thought was, yeah, that tracks. That makes sense.
There was a reason for the oil. You can't bite me if you can't catch me. He's so slippery. What were we talking about? The opening. Can I talk about the opening?
Please do.
I think this is one of the, still to this day, one of the most effective openings of a film. The use of the music, the aerial shots. And by the way, they took that fairground or whatever and somehow made it the most creepiest thing ever during the course of this film. Even though nothing ever happens there.
It was something to do with that montage in the beginning. It was usually I don't like montages in films, but they really did a good job. It set the tone for the entire film.
Yes.
That is 100% what I would say. It sets the tone so well. It adds this kind of creep factor to it. You don't know why. You know you're bothered. Something clearly is not right in this place. And then from then on, it's there throughout the whole course of the film. And I think it starts with the opening.
For me, a lot of what I really liked this time of rewatching it was the sounds. The sound effects of them flying.
Yes.
I don't know what they did to make that sound effect, but I love the way that it sounded. Whenever you heard them flying, it was just creepy. And the sound of, for example, the grandfather's car horn.
Yes.
La cucaracha, which is what that is.
Yeah.
But it's also creepy.
It dies in the middle and then picks up at the end.
Yes. The soundtrack to this film, it's not just like cool music, it's really effective use of music.
Yes.
You know, People Are Strange at the beginning, again, setting us up for this world of Santa Clara. I loved everything about the setup.
That Cry Little Sister song.
Oh,
That's
yes.
what just lives rent-free in my head.
Part of the setup, part of the montage that I loved was the missing people posters. You see that a lot at the beginning. Again, creepy. What's happening here? Why are all these people missing? Loved it. Just like when they pull in and you see the sign and it's beautiful, and then they pass it, and on the back it's spray painted murder capital of the,
Right.
of the US or whatever. So many great lines in this film. It starts at the beginning when Grandpa's on the porch pretending to be dead. And what does Sam say? If he's dead, can we go back to Phoenix? It's like he's Mr. Comic Relief in this film, which you don't expect from somebody this young. He's so funny.
My favorite one.
Okay.
My own brother, a goddamn shit-sucking vampire. Wait till Mom finds out.
Yeah. I'm at the mercy of your sex glands.
It had wonderful 80s moments, like the video clubs. I
Yes,
love that
yeah.
in the video club, they had National Lampoon's European Vacation and The Goonies. I did also notice the Rob Lowe poster on Sam's wall. Actually, it's on his closet. He has a super young, hunky Rob Lowe. What were you going to say, Steve?
I was just going to comment that I loved getting into the car, starting it, saying, all right, let's go to town. Turns off the car and leaves.
It is funnier than I remembered it being. When I was thinking about watching this movie, I was like, isn't this going to be kind of angsty, right? Michael's this or whatever. Completely forgetting how funny it is, how sweet it is at times. The relationship between Michael and Sam is kind of adorable, right? Even when he's upset at him, I will say,
flying outside of his window.
that is such
Yeah,
a
flying
great...
nun.
That is such a great scene. And I remembered that scene in the past, and watching it this time, I was like, that's still a great scene. That is so well done. I think one of the reasons is the actors in this film are actually really good. Jason Patric sells this so well. Even though he's Mr. Heartthrob or whatever, he's still a good actor. And he totally sells the character going through this very difficult thing. Again, I think it's a good group of actors. Did you notice that David wore gloves the entire time?
I didn't pick up on that at all.
No.
Did you know that there was actually a reason for that? Apparently, Kiefer Sutherland broke his arm doing a wheelie on his motorcycle. They had to put him in gloves so you couldn't see he was wearing a cast. And two, they actually fixed his motorcycle so you could drive it one-handed because he couldn't hold it with both hands. Even the motorcycle montage, the biker's like, come on, Michael. He's like, I can't beat you. It's like, you don't have to beat me, Michael. You just have to
keep up.
And that leads to this kind of motorcycle chase. It's a little dated in the way it's shot, but it was still kind of cool.
Yeah, it was great. And then it leads to all of the other things, going down to the cave and then going to
Yes.
the train tracks. I think there was a bit of a stretch of him wanting so quickly to turn into a biker guy to get star. And I think you can make that leap to he wants to fit in, he wants to make friends.
I do agree with you. I think they did rush that a bit. It seemed like 1 second he didn't know who these people were, and the next second you're like, oh, and you're a biker now? He's like, okay, I'll hang out with these guys. Star is like, Michael, don't. I'm like, weren't you the one saying, like, hey, you could have told me to buzz off. I would have never been with the biker gang, but you seemed interested, and now I'm a vampire. This sucks.
Yeah, he got angry later. What did you do to me?
Yeah. She's like, I told you not to drink it. Even that was like, Not that it was bad, because it's still a very cool scene, but it's still very quick. Here, drink this. It's all good. Uh-oh, you're a vampire now. Doesn't that suck? It's like, what?
Not yet, but you will.
Oh, I will say that I do like something with the film. Even as a young guy, I was like, these guys are cool. They ride motorcycles. They hang out in a cave. They get takeout. They're all awesome, and everyone's being really neat. And then we get to the scene where you actually see them be vampires. Because the other shots, like the aerial shots and stuff, and you see them attacking people, but you don't actually see them. You just see the perspective of the person who's like, oh my God, it's coming. But this is the first time in the film where you see them actually violently rip people apart, cover themselves in blood, look like vampires. And suddenly the cool biker gang is not. They're animals, and they're terrifying. When Michael goes, oh, I don't want this. It's like, well, no, you don't want this. This is what this is. And I do think that's part of what David is kind of like, initiation's over, right? Yeah. It's time to do the real deal.
Yeah, I think it wasn't necessarily a horror film. It was a thriller and a mystery film. And then it became a little bit more of a horror film, I think almost when they came to the house to get them. That's when it turned into a horror film, and the gore came out and things like that.
I did not remember the blood explosion, as I think I wrote it, where the Frog Brothers stake one of the vampires, clearly having never done it before, and they just get buckets of blood poured on them, which was super surprising and gross and also hilarious.
Yeah.
I think that leads me to my one major problem with the film. Was when one of the vampires comes into the bathroom and he sees the garlic in the holy water, and he says, oh, garlic doesn't work, asshole. And they say, it's holy water, and they splash him in the face. And then Nanook, first time we've said Nanook in this whole podcast so far.
That's true.
That's a failing on our part, yeah.
Nanook the dog.
So Nanook comes in and knocks the vampire into the holy water and then licks his chops like, yeah, I did that. But after the vampire dies, the plumbing in the entire house just explodes with blood. That was ridiculous. It was just way over the top, the damage that one vampire in a bathtub of holy water would do to the plumbing of the entire house.
Well, and we can also kind of think about it as, wait a minute, when David gets it, none of that happens, right?
Well, they do say at one point, all vampires go differently. David should have been the one
who exploded in blood and all that, right? Yeah, and he doesn't. And in fact, he kind of looks younger at the end of it, which I thought was kind of interesting. It showed his innocence, like this is what he was as a human, which I did actually kind of like.
My favorite one was death by stereo.
I wrote that down because I actually said death by stereo before he said it. And then I was like, I wonder where that's from. And then he said it. And I was like, oh my God, it's from this. I just quoted this film while watching it. It was kind of a very 80s fight in the house. The water pistols, I thought, was also very 80s because they were Uzis. And as somebody who watched the movie Predator from my parents' bedroom while holding my toy Uzi behind pillows for any time the Predator would come out. Yes. Which they don't really sell Uzis like that anymore.
No, they do not.
The bridge scene. The biker gang goes up to this bridge. Michael's like, what are we doing? They're like, you'll see. And then they slowly appeared to jump off the bridge. And they're actually, and it's like train tracks or whatever, right? And they're actually hanging to bars underneath, which clearly we know they're vampires, man. Like they're clearly just flying up there. And then he climbs down and they have that whole scene. It's still kind of terrifying. The way it's shot looks terrifying. And he's like barely holding on, and David is just loving it. And he's just like, there's something in his look that I'm just like, good Lord. And then that falling into just the fog, and then him hearing them laughing underneath. There's just something really creepy, wonderful about that. Steve, you have a unique perspective. You did not have the opportunity to fall in love with Star and Dianne Wiest when you were young. You did not have this experience. You once again had this experience as a grown-up.
Yes.
So what did you think about this film?
You have used this phrase once or twice for films that we have talked about where you had to see the film at a certain time or else you missed it. And I'm sorry to say that this film is one of those that I missed. I should have seen this when I was much younger. Now that I have seen it when I'm older, it's a great movie. I understand the appeal. I understand why it's a cult classic, but it's an 80s vampire movie.
It was the sax guy, wasn't it?
It was the
Oily sax guy.
No, I liked it, but it just did not have the draw to me that it has to the two of you.
Did it come across as a teenage vampire film?
Yes, it did. And I'm wondering if I had seen it before the explosion of teenage vampire everything, it might have had a bit more of an effect on me. But, you know, I'm familiar with Twilight. I'm familiar with the other things that have come out between then and now. So it's just kind of okay, it's another one. It was the first one. You've just informed me, and that lends it a bit more weight. But still, it's just kind of a vampire teenage thing.
I will point out something that I learned while doing research for this film. Interview with a Vampire, Anne Rice, book, 1994 movie, now currently a series, if I'm not mistaken. Do you know that book came out in 1976? I always assumed it came out in the 90s.
Interview with the Vampire came
Interview
out
with a
76.
Vampire came out in 76.
I thought it
And-
was earlier than that. Okay.
Well, and the reason that I found that interesting was the writers who were working on this script originally, the first two writers, it was Interview with a Vampire that talked about having a 12-year-old vampire. That was part of also the idea of like, oh, what would that be like? And so they took that idea from the character of Interview with a Vampire and applied it to this script. Again, before our director decided that, no, I want teenagers and I want them sexy.
I wonder if that's why they added Laddie into the script without ever really explaining.
I
where he
wonder
came
if
from.
that's just a little hint of the original, why we did this, or, you know, the original idea. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that's probably it. What about you, Shaun? A decade, as you said, later, watching it again. Does this film hold up for you?
Kind of repeating what Steven has said about if you hadn't seen it when it first came out, I don't think you'll get it. I absolutely loved it. Watching it again. I'm visiting my parents and my family. I live in Japan and I'm just here on holiday. And so while I was visiting my mom, I asked her if she had The Lost Boys. And my mom has a virtual library of DVDs and VHSs, still has a VHS player. And she said, yeah, I think I have it somewhere. I went through all of her files and I found it. And it had not been opened yet. And then we watched it together. It's a fantastic trip down memory lane. And for me, it holds up. I think I do see things in a little bit of a different way, and I see a little bit more of the cheese, and I see a little bit more of the teenage directorial choices. But being able to go down memory lane and hear all of those quotes that I had been saying even to my son, like, maggots, you're eating maggots, Michael. And even seeing ones that I'm misquoting, I think that was really fun to say, oh, I've been saying that wrong the whole time. It's been fun. It's really fun to rewatch it.
You know, I wasn't concerned about this one. And maybe it's because I've seen it so many times that I was like, I don't think I'm not going to like this. I think I'm still going to like it. I did, despite the shortcomings that I also saw. I still loved the film, and I think I found myself loving new aspects of the film that I hadn't caught in the past.
Same.
Little
I
details.
really picked up on, because I've made some short films myself, and I'm a photographer as well, so I really pick up on those things a little bit more. And one of the tools that they used to film David's sequences is having him overexposed all the time. I never really picked up on that before, but it's really creepy, because he's almost the bluish, whitish character where everything else is in the correct exposure.
I think one of the things I really learned to appreciate was people's performances in it. I just never thought of it that way, but watching it, I'm like, these guys are all really good actors. Yeah. This is really good. The only ones where I'll be like, okay, this was truly over the top, and I'm not going to claim remotely good acting, and that was the Frog Brothers. Sorry, guys. Like, Corey Haim was rocking it. You guys, okay. Like, You were funny, but it was still like, I can't put you in the same category as Corey Haim and Jason Patric. Are you going to disagree? Here comes the good content.
Yeah, I think I'm with Shaun on this one. Go ahead.
I have to say, I was not going to be the one to say it because I know they are beloved in this film, and I wasn't going to be the one to say, yeah, their performance was a little bit much. They're too much of a characterization.
I'm wondering, though, how much was it the actors and how much was the script and the way their characters were written?
The director, Joel Schumacher, had told them to watch all of like Rambo movies and things like those kinds of films and to be exactly like that. If you disagree, put a comment in.
Or not. Just hit like and subscribe and it'll be fine. Okay, so that's what we thought about this film. What did the people think about this film? Well, the people liked this film. The people agreed with us. The movie had a budget of $8.5 million. It made $32.2 million at the box office. It even still has like pretty decent score overall on like Metacritic and all of that. I will say that the critics are leaning towards the Steve of it all. Just to give you an example, Mr. Ebert gave it like 2 Steves and said a cast that's good right down the line.
Okay.
So, agrees with us there.
Yep.
But then said ambitious entertainment that starts out well, but ends up selling its soul. Which tells me kind of what we talked about. Like it was going really well, and then they just went over the top 80s and it just collapsed. Variety said, horrifically dreadful vampire teensploitation. So I don't think they liked it. That was pretty much generally what critics thought. They did not like this. This is one of those movies where the teenagers loved it and the grown-ups did not love it. Something that I'd never noticed before until this particular viewing was that when Grandpa, after killing Max, goes to the refrigerator to get himself a drink, the refrigerator door is just covered in the blood explosion stuff. It was gross. And then he has the end line, which is the end of the film. That's the last line in the film. Yeah. What's the line, Steve?
The one thing about living in Santa Clara I could never stomach. All the damn vampires.
I will say, while we're at it, as we come to the conclusion.
Yes, yeah.
It is the unexpected twist that if you watch the movie, he's constantly putting up posts that have spikes on them on his property. He knows, but we never notice it.
He never mentions it to anyone.
He never mentions it to anybody. And so it's such a great little twist at the end. Like, I still love that. I still love that it's Grandpa who saves the day.
Yeah.
Nobody else. Everyone is like 2 seconds away from everybody dying or turning into vampires. And here comes Grandpa out of the blue.
When he was doing that, I think that's when they stole his car and went to town. When he was putting the post in, I thought he was just drunk and put it in wrong. Then when at the end, when he drives through and
they come right out.
They come, those spikes come flying in, and that's what kills Max, right?
Yeah.
Then you're like, oh, did he do that on purpose? Or maybe he was just drunk. Who knows?
And then he removes all doubt. I have to say, I did love that ending. A very 80s ending, but thoroughly enjoyable.
And then the music clicks in.
And then the music clicks in. Gosh, it's so good. There was supposed to be a sequel that involved David. The reason that supposedly that David didn't explode or anything like that was actually because they were going to bring him back for
Lost Boys 2?
The Lost Girls. That was the original plan for the sequel. It didn't work out. Schumacher was trying to put together a sequel. They did multiple scripts. They couldn't figure it out. Eventually, I think he gave up. There was a sequel, direct to DVD, in 2008. Lost Boys, The Tribe, followed by, in 2010, Lost Boys, The Thirst.
Oh, no.
This reminds me of the Beastmaster sequels when you're like, every title sounds worse than the last one. In 2021, there was talk about making a new film, but the one that amused me the most was December of 2023. There was an article where they had people attached to create Lost Boys, the musical.
The musical?
Dear God, no.
Yeah. And they had like decent people with awards who were working on it. We'll see. I mean, they've done it to a bunch of other stuff.
Can you not just picture a musical number where the 5 of them are hanging off of a bridge and then one by one they let go and disappear into a smoky stage so that you can't see what happened to them.
Absolutely, but only if they're singing during it. David,
Of course.
let it go, David.
Maggots.
Jeepers creepers.
There's got to be a song about maggots. in there
Maggots,
as well.
I think that takes us to our inevitable conclusion of The Lost Boys. To kind of continue the theme of Halloween, we have talked about vampires, and I almost went with more vampires.
I was hoping you would, actually.
Well, I'm here to disappoint.
Okay.
Instead of going with vampires, I thought to myself, what about werewolves? And then I thought to myself, is there a weird werewolf movie when somebody who it makes no sense that they would be playing a werewolf? Does that exist? And I thought to myself, what if we watched 1994's Wolf?
Not what I thought you were going for. Very
Neither
good.
did I. I did
What the
not
heck
think
did
you
you
were
think,
going
people?
there.
I was gonna
Were you with me? You were thinking Michael J. Fox?
I was.
Yep.
You thought I was going to go with Teen Wolf?
I thought you were going
Yes.
with Teen Wolf.
Come on. No, I'm
Hoping
talking
that
about...
you were going to go for American Werewolf in London.
Oh, that would have been good too.
Well, again, I'm here to disappoint you both. I am talking about the 1994 film starring Jack Nicholson, Michelle Pfeiffer, and James Spader.
I don't
You don't?
know that film.
Steve, do you know this film?
No.
I do. And that's all I'm going to say. So instead of saying anything else, what I'll say is thank you so much for spending this time with us. Please please subscribe if you haven't already, or you can unsubscribe and subscribe again. That'd be fine.
That doesn't help.
We appreciate all of you. The comments that you leave us are great. We like to respond to them every time we can.
Before we go, if people are interested in seeing more of Shaun and his work, Shaun, where can people find you on the internet?
You can go to YouTube and type in Shaun Keenan Photography. Shaun is spelled Shaun. Or you can go to my website, which is also SeanKeenanPhotography.com.
See you next time for this film that neither of these people has heard of, Wolf.
Sit back, it's time to get groovy. Question, do you remember that movie?